I'm currently working with a group of people in Boston around a campaign to get sex education and consent instituted and brought to a particular school, but to schools in general. There have been situations where students have had their consent and their boundaries violated by other students, and of course we know situations where youth consent has been violated by adults, of course, and I speak to that in general. So we know that that is a particular consideration in this culture. Also, we have to learn to create contexts for young people, for students, for youth to learn not only the language, but the action of acquiring and giving consent for intimate touch and even for proximal relationship. Who do they want to be in particular space with? Who are they comfortable with being around? Of course, in schools and organizations and corporations and companies, we often are within range of people that we do not like and that we would not like to be in intimate connection with. And there are rules for against sexual harassment and other kinds of harassment in the workplace and in other spaces. With that said, we still have a lot of work to do in that area. And where youth are concerned, we have to give them the vocabulary and have to give them the permission to advocate for themselves in ways that makes them safe, that makes them feel safe, and also that empowers them to be an agency about their own body and who they allow to touch them or be around them. That can be something we do within the home also. An area of discussion recently has been around, how do we ask our children to connect with adults that may be in our family or may be close connections to our family, rather than saying, please go hug or kiss Uncle Frank. Might need to be said, would you like to? Or is it okay to give a hug to that person? Or would you like to receive a hug from that person? And if not, if they say no, validate that with them and talk about that with them and say, yeah, you did a great job validating for your own space, your own body, your own advocacy. All right, so there are a lot of conversations we need to have with young people around this issue, and there's a lot of work that we need to do with other adults around illuminating and fighting rape culture, illuminating and fighting molestation, illuminating and fighting and stopping the sexual harassment or sexualized violence that, of course, children can be prone to in certain spaces. So we have to be having those conversations as adults. We have to support organizations and groups and individuals who are doing consent work, who are doing sex education work in the ways that are appropriate for young people and appropriate for young adults and appropriate for adults. So we need to get comfortable with that kind of language of talking about sex, talking about consent, talking about body autonomy, body agency, emotional agency, emotional intelligence, and really look at how are we falling short of doing that kind of education, particularly within schools, and that includes colleges, high schools, but also in our cultures, in our cities, in our towns, in our nations, states, in our villages in general. So this is work that we really have to do on their behalf, but we have to also do that with them. And we also have to build and grow young people who are ready to have these conversations in the ways that are appropriate for them. And we have to support them and validate them and listen to them and ask them when they are feeling unsafe. Ask them, how do they feel most safe being in community, being in our families, being in larger groupings of people. That's very, very important. And when we build those skills with them when they're young, they take that into their young adult and adult lives in a much more safe way. And also in a way that they do not become the perpetrators that we end up talking about, or actually not talking about quite a lot. So again, we may get into that trend of victim blaming instead of calling out those people who are perpetrating sexual harassment or sexual violation, not only against children, but against people in general. But these are conversations we need to have. They're really, really important. Too many people, too many young people are getting hurt and having their childhood stolen away from them. So we have to do this work to help them not only protect themselves, but to build a culture, a consent culture, that minimizes, if not stops altogether, the ways that we violate each other and the ways that we can. Anyone can become a violator of someone's boundaries at any given point, but having conversations about consent and sexual education is important to diminishing that eventuality or that situation. So we have to do this work, we have to have these conversations, and I'd like to have these conversations with you. Let's talk.